yeux de lumière qui voient passer au loin les oiseaux.
The rule is, and that is given by, I don't know whom, the university or something, you have to write an essay and participate in the discussion, and that is a course paper and theory performance. It's called 50% each. Meaning you can fail. Basically, I hope nobody does, but at least, yeah, take part, participate in terms of contribute to what we are doing, and as well overcome whatever it is, shyness or whatever, speaking. As I said, nobody is perfect anywhere, nobody here is native English speaker. If there is anything, ask here or come to the office. I'm usually there from in the morning until the evening, I don't know exactly when, meaning as well it is better to arrange that I'm really there. Usually I am, but sometimes I just go out. So I said there are these two different ways of theory building. The one is an affirmative problem-solving theory. The other is a critical theory. Now, there is a question. There is a question in the discussion if jurisprudence, if a theory of law can actually be a critical theory, or if any theory of law is by definition already affirmative, it's already a problem solving. Because what we want to do with law is we want to solve a problem. And we want to solve it now, in the relationship of party A and B. We are not interested in group relationships. We are not interested in the relationship of D and F in 20 years. But we are thinking about what is today the case, and how can we explain it, or how can we deal with the fact that the traffic light is red does not allow me to cross the street or make a step onto the street, and the child is in danger. And then the position is there. It is not the task of the theory of law to think about it, but then we have philosophy of law, or we have sociology of law, and they can and have to think about questions like this. I personally would not agree, and I would personally go with what probably Jering would say as well. You have this tension in law, permanently dealing with what is right, meaning what is lawful, and what is just. And it is not just to say, okay, the child will die, I can't do anything about it. And I have to think about, as lawyer about, and as well I have to develop a theory, as lawyer, in this case, when I am at court, and I have to be able to say, this is the situation. This is what we always have in law. We have a certain constellation, we have a certain situation. Usually two parties, that's two individuals, or one individual and a group, or two groups. And they are in a relation to each other, which can be supportive, this can be hostile, this can be whatsoever. And we have to do something with it. We have to maintain it, we have to solve a problem. But then we have to ask, what is actually the problem? Is it road security, or is it the life of a child? What is more important? This is a theoretical question. And we will come back to this later, which is very difficult in human rights, international human rights, that you have different positions there defining what is a human right. You can always say in very simple terms and very straightforward, in an individual case, the right to live, the right to life. But there is no such thing as only one life. There's always something that we are in some kind of social context. So I always have to ask this question, it is the right to life. This is without any question right. But what is with this right if a life of 10 other people is in danger? It's a war situation. As simple as that. In war, you always decide exactly this. Religious freedom. To which extent, or you can say, yeah, it's fine, do whatever you want. It's your thing. But what is if you, for instance, suppress women due to religious reasons? It's a very common...
Like in a Muslim religion. Like in a Muslim religion.
Which is said that the Quran says and prescribes this. That's then a question if it really does and blah, blah, blah. But yes, this is exactly the question. I have the freedom to express my religion, but it ends when I am in conflict, I'm getting in conflict with the freedom of somebody else.
But these also can be implied in real life, because in some other cultures and other religions as well, it doesn't mention that women have to stay home to like be the second in the relationship, that man has to be above, but they choose it themselves.
But this is exactly the point. You never choose yourself entirely free. You always are in a relationship.
Yes.
And this is, we come to this as well, humans are social beings. And Marx said, even you can only individualize in society. You are always depending in one way or another on society. And having mentioned him, Marx, he says this is an illusion. What Defoe writes or others, the Robinsonade, you are shipwrecked and you are on an island. Now you're completely without society. There is no other human being up to Friday. But even then you are in society. Robinson knew language. Language is a social thing. Robinson decided about weeks. He counted days. For what reason? Because he was a social being. He was producing. He actually saved tools from the ship. Social things. He knew how to produce something. Social things. So even if you are on your own, you are not without society.
Everything is connected. Always connected to something.
And this is so important to understand this, that you do not have abstract rights. This is the exception, where it's really about the life of one person, independent of everything else. So, in methodological terms, meaning in terms of how we approach reality, we have this beautiful term of methodological individualism. In the dominant social science. Usually we say we start from the individual. And the individual builds up society. It's an aggregate. Society is an aggregate. Meaning, society doesn't exist in this understanding. It's only the individual, and the individuals act independent of each other. And then you will have society. There is another position where you say, actually, we have society. First, we have society. And then you are born into society. Into your specific society. And this is what forms you. It's not the individual, but it is society coming first. And this is making us as personalities, shaping us. It's not that we do it. And that we then say, yeah, we'll join this group, and we will abstain from this group. We do this to some extent, but at the same time, the society exists whenever we come. And this is the same with what we may call methodological nationalism, that we first think about one nation independent of others. Instead of saying we are living and we are increasingly aware of it, we are living in a global world. And whatever happens here in China, it will have an effect on Turkmenistan, even if we don't think about it, even if we cannot see it. Whatever happens in Vietnam has an effect on China, even if it's not relevant in terms of in the news. But there are these links, complex links, and they are sometimes not linked to, or not having effect today or tomorrow. A decision we take today, as a country, will decide in one way or another what happens in 10 years at the other end of the world. Now, it may be that it's too small, this effect, to think about it, and we cannot think about everything. But at least we have to be aware of it, that there are these complex connections. People in space and in time, permanently interacting.
Où les matins effeuillent les rêves pour nous donner un monde d'amour.
Now I want to do something that at least gives you the impression of being completely out of place, strange. And I'm not phenomenologist. That is one theoretical school, basically, phenomenology. I'm not really buying into it, but at the same time I want to refer to something that supposedly Aron, one of these phenomenalists, said to Jean-Paul Sartre, sitting there in a bar and saying, if you are a phenomenologist, you can actually philosophize about this cocktail. This has a meaning, this tiny thing that is just a personal cocktail. But there is an entire philosophy about it. And the idea to do this kind of experiment came up not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, when I was walking along the street, along a shopping street where I live at the other end of the city, the railway campus. And I was just walking there, sunny day, Sunday, people walking around, and I thought about this again and again. I do this madness of scootering, of scooter driving here in China. I'm used to Italy. I lived in Italy. Once a car nearly knocked me down, and when I looked at the driver, she looked at me and, what's the story? What's your problem? I'm still alive, so go ahead. So I'm used to kind of mad driving, but I think here it's really topping this. It's just without light. You drive on the wrong side, on the pedestrian way, just back on the street, it doesn't matter, everything is possible. As I said, you can philosophize about the cocktail, but definitely about this. This is what you have in theory of the state. Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, saying people are in a permanent war. Everybody against everybody else. This is the state of nature, he said. So what we have is, we have a state, Leviathan, he said, and this state is setting rules. For people driving properly. If there's red, you stop. If there's green, you drive. I'm kind of a little bit mad, probably. If there is green, I walk as a pedestrian. And I pretend to look to the other side. Up to now, I survived. But people are really driving at you, and stopping in the last minute.
Yeah.
So they think it doesn't matter if there is green or not. We just drive. We have the right. We have I don't know what, from where this right is. In another constituency, you don't have it. So basically what you have in this situation, which is, actually it is a legal situation, there is much of law involved, but if you take it from another side, you don't think about law, you don't think about the state in terms of the Leviathan of Hobbes, and you don't think about Rousseau, who said actually we have too much regulation. We should leave it to the people, they find a way. And then you come to this phenomenon, really, that certain people are protected. Children. You drive like mad, and you see there's a child and you immediately stop. You see a frail person, you stop, you slow down. There are certain situations where you accept, for instance, as well, sometimes it is a disadvantage, sometimes it is an advantage. As foreigners, we have certain privileges sometimes that people accept that we do not know this kind of rule of driving. And then you have, of course, power games here. Who is the stronger on the street, on the road? And sometimes it is, or definitely it is, the SUV. But at the same time, if you insist, it may be that it is you. But actually, a bus driver told me, he was driving in the city, a sightseeing bus in Ireland, and he said, I always watch for pedestrians crossing the street, but always pretend not to watch, because then they stop. They don't cross the street.
Yeah.
If I look at them, they will cross. If I look into the other direction, they will stop. So there is so much in such a kind of meaningless situation, so much law in it, so much regulation in it, so much theory of the state actually, of how we behave. And this is the reason why I added the text today. It's a quote from Marx, as you could see. It would seem right to start with the real and concrete, with the actual presupposition, e.g. in political economy, to start with the population. So this is what we see. We go onto the street, we see the population, people, which forms the basis and the subject of the whole social act of production. It's people who are producing. The population. Everybody does produces something. From a car or parts for a car to knowledge, whatsoever. Closer consideration shows, however, that this is wrong. Population is an abstraction This is important. It seems to be concrete. The people who are running around, they are concrete, but they are an abstraction. If, for instance, one disregards the classes of which it is composed. So we have the population, and then we qualify it basically to say it is not the entire population, but it is certain classes. These classes in turn remain an empty phrase if one does not know the elements of which they are on which they are based, e.g., for instance, wage labor, capital, etc. There you see again, we are working with theories. We have something, we are now looking at classes, we are not looking at gender. We are not looking at the size of people, or if they have black hair or grey hair or whatsoever. These presuppose exchange, division of labor, prices, etc. For instance, capital is nothing without wage labor, without value, money, price, etc. If I were to start with the population, it would be a chaotic conception of the whole, and through closer definitions, one would arrive analytically at increasingly simple concepts. So it is as well about simplification. We are able to understand something. We are not able to understand this chaos of population, of millions, of thousands of people. We are able to understand them if we are narrowing it down, building classes, analytical classes, and look what is important, what is essential. From the imagined concrete, one would move to more and more tenuous abstractions until one arrived at the simplest determinations. From there it would be necessary to make a return journey until one finally arrived once more at population, which is this time would be not a chaotic conception of a whole, but a rich totality of many determinations and relations. This means we have to go through these different steps to understand what is the scope, what is the meaning of law. It is not this abstract thing of a simple act that seems to be always the same. But it has to be considered in a context. Only then we can understand law. Only then we can understand rights. We do not have rights, but we have rights if and when, under certain conditions, in a certain relationship. Okay, so this is what we have to do in terms of thinking about what society is. Society is not just a population living together. But there are classes, there are different groups, and there are different rules. And then I come to this one thing I asked you to do last week. And those who studied law, or who studied law long enough and far enough, they will probably know that one of our common languages is Latin. At least it's still very common in law, jurisprudence, to use Latin. And one of these beautiful sentences, ubo societas ibi jus est. Where there is society, there is law. And apparently this sentence is motivating people to study law, or it is putting people off studying law, because they are reading this sentence and then they try to figure out what it actually means, and they never find out. And when they found out, they are retiring, so they don't need to study anymore. What did you think about this sentence? What does it mean for you? Where there is society, there is law.
Whether society or law?
Hmm?
Whether society or law?
No, where there is society. Ubo societas ibi jus est. Where there is society, there is law.
Yes.
But what does it really mean?
If there is more than one person, there's always law.
Society maybe can't exist without law.
Hmm?
Society maybe can't exist without law.
Okay.
Because there would be a mess if there would be no law between people. Even like common transactions should
Even small groups of people, small contracts needs law.
Now you said something different to what you said first.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying what you want.
Okay. Because this is the tiny differences in the interpretation. I think are interesting, really, and there may be more.
I don't know, I'm just such cold that I can't see.
Law is everywhere. In the family, everywhere. Everyone has its own organization, its own law. I mean, without official law, there's always law. Social law.
Social law.
Yeah. I can interpret it like that.
Well, I was thinking as well about, is there is law, or I can take up on this now and can say law is always social law, meaning it is where society is, and we do not have law, the law of the bush, meaning animals. It's sometimes called law of the bush. Animals, there is a certain law how animals behave. Or there are economic laws. Different opinions of, some say it's demand and supply and demand. Some actually say some say it's demand and supply, some say it's supply and demand. Would that be laws? Or does law depend on social direct social interaction?
confusing. It's like it's difficult to discuss because law can be seen in all angles, different angles, different prospects.
Okay, but then I have another question for you. Is that always the same law? If we have, I just was thinking about another law, water boils at 98 point something, let's say at 100 degree, and it freezes at 0.
Yeah.
When you say wherever you have people being together, there is law. Why is it actually?
What?
Why is there law when as soon as people are two people are together, there is law? You say. Why?
Because they have different thinking,
Different people,
different emotions,
thinking, yeah.
different thinking, different views to the life.
Different like moral, moral,
Different thinking, different lifestyle. Even, for example, a man and a woman, they meet and they deeply love each other, they have the same habits, they have the same everything, they will still have some kind of flaw.
So basically, law is about conflict?
Yes.
No, law is about regulation. To regulate, to control us. Because I don't think that people can exist without law. There would be a mess in the world because, like, I don't know how to control people who may be out of their mind or I don't know how to explain that, but it's impossible to live without law. In different kinds of law.
Everyone has different mind, different thinking. We shouldn't say out of mind, but everyone has its own thinking. So to make all different thinking to think same way, we need law. So law will make people think in one direction. Law will make people to understand each other properly. So there will not be any flaws in the system. So law is basically makes one system work without flaw, not any flaw.
But if I take this now, I can say law is a kind of last resort.
What?
A kind of last resort. If I take especially what you say, some people are out of mind.
Like, yeah, I'm just thinking about like killers, rapers, about like thieves. I don't think that they're out of the mind, but I don't know how to explain. They're like преступники. That's like преступники. Criminals, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if there will be no law, they will think that they are doing the right stuff. So law should explain to the people what is good, what is wrong, because every person can have their own mind, what is good, what is bad. So there should be something that can show to people what is good, what is bad, what we can do and what we can't do. And this is the same stuff with the red light you don't allow to go. Who said that? It says by law, right?
Equal rights.
Equal rights, yeah. We all should be equal and all should be helpful, maybe.
Feminism.
There is one implication here now. Do you define in advance or do you define ex post? Meaning, do you expect there is a law? I can come to my old neighbor in Ireland. It was not only a small country and island, but it was a small village where I lived. And my neighbor apparently drove one day to the city, and his wife was with him. And he said, like, damn, this year the Christmas light is so early. And she only said, no, this is a traffic light and not a Christmas light. So basically, when is it getting relevant that you set the law, that you define this is right and this is wrong? Do you say, now with the traffic light, there you basically say, yes, the traffic light, from now on we have regulation of the traffic with the light, and red is red and means stop. Or do we say, let's see what happens. We say red means just be careful. Now it's not up to you to drive, but others. But if there is nobody else, just go ahead. And then when it is getting congested, and there are more and more accidents, despite the traffic light, we say now it is red, and red means stop. Whatever it is, even if it's in the middle of the night, there is no car at all, you stop. So it makes a difference. Do we say from the beginning, from the outset, before something happens, this is how you have to behave? Or do we set a rule if something bad happens?
If you can know it in advance, of course, it's something that happens. But if you can know what happens in advance, but I just think that we live in such time that every bad happened already, and we can know what is good and what is bad. Like everything has already happened. But if there is something new and we can't we can't know, will be this good or will be this bad? Of course, it's impossible to decide it in advance, but I don't know how to explain that.
Well, we have actually in. I wanted to say first, especially in human rights law, but it's not quite correct. But we have exactly this consideration. Do we? Originally, we have had, well, first there was something else, but we have had the Universal Declaration. And now we have such a body related to it. And there is always something new coming. And this is exactly the question. Do we wait? Or do we say in advance that there may be something, and we think about what could happen?
For example, if there is a situation with extinct animals or extinct plants, which is in a red book. So, for example, there wasn't some kind of hunting to their animals, but we know that they are
almost extinct.
Yeah, there are almost extinct and there are too few in the world, so we can decide in advance that it would be a crime if you kill that kind of animal or that kind of plant. No.
To prevent the extinction of the animals.
To prevent it in advance. Even if there wasn't some kind of crimes.
I know what you mean, but be aware of the really difficult and acute question. We have digital industries now. What is with data? Do we define in advance? This is data we produce, and we protect the person who produces it? Or do we define the data as relevant for the public and say, this interest, the public interest, is more important than the individual interest of somebody producing, giving data away, not even being aware of it? Or is it really data that is relevant for me and only for me, and that I want to be protected? I don't want that everybody else can know with whom I am going to dinner. It's my thing. But it is automatically registered when I use a telephone or when I pay with my credit card. It has the address of the restaurant and it can be used for other purposes. So where is the limitation? And when do I say, this is my right, a discussion on this in human rights, privacy. This is private, this is public. When do I define it? Where is society? Is society there when I go with my boyfriend, girlfriend, child, married partner, or whatever, wife, to the restaurant? Is this already society? Or is society something else?
It is society. If more than one person, it's always society.
And as such relevant for law?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody agrees?
Yeah, I might agree, because if you are disturbing other people, it also means like you are disturbing society. No matter how you disturb them. For example, even in a restaurant, they're eating and if you are singing or dancing on the table, it means you are disturbing society.
Sneezing or you have baby in your arms.
No, come on, baby is bad.
It's disturbing.
So what? You should
For example, for me it's disturbing.
So you should sit at home with your kid, right? You're not allowed to go outside?
Yes.
Oh, go, man.
I think I am right.
I hope you
That's why I'm saying people not out of mind. Everyone has different thinking. That's why people think law.
So up to 9 o'clock you have to your child, you can have it with you, and after 9 o'clock not anymore.
Huh?
Up to 9 o'clock you can have your child with you, and after 9 o'clock not anymore.
Yeah.
Is there something of a little bit society, a little bit more of society, and much society?
There are actually. Depends on the social life. Each person's social life. People make rules, people make laws, so everyone will understand each other. Everyone will not have any misunderstanding. Yeah,
Well, this little discussion, I only wanted to make you aware of seemingly questions that are non-Christian. We know the answer anyway. And sometimes very narrow lines, grades, where we have to find a way of precisely defining what we mean. And there is, in sociology, for instance, in political science as well, there are different uses of the term society. You have a good society, you have actually a legal society that is defined by law, the society in terms of a charity or a political club or of a football club, leisure club. And then you have this diffuse thing of society in terms of what I quoted before, the population. Or you have a state. And then you have in political theory, you have a different understanding of it. You would have the Hobbesian, there is a war. Usually people are in a war situation to each other. There is a conflict, meaning they are egoistically behaving, and everybody is looking for his or her own benefit, most of it, greedy people. And then you would have another position, for instance, Rousseau, Contrat Social, saying, no, people are permanently in interaction, and they need some rules, but the main thing is really allow them to find the rules. In general, they are not looking for conflict. And then you have various state theories in between and combining different things. But this is, at least we have to be aware of it. Because then we have, of course, different states as well. That in one way or another, and then it's getting even more exciting, relating to each other. So what we have in the human rights law or human rights discussion, we have exactly, at least this is the original position, human rights and citizens, they relate to each other. This is what human rights law was originally about. It was something that the human rights discussion actually did not play a role in ancient societies. What is your guess or what is your knowledge about when did human rights discussions start?
Back from the Greece?
Ancient Greece.
Yes. BC? Not BC. AC.
It was Enlightenment.
Ah.
Enlightenment.
That's good.
It was when the feudal societies came under pressure by the bourgeoisie, and the bourgeoisie actually, in philosophy, Kant, in economics, Adam Smith, in political science, John Locke, in law, Montesquieu. These had been really globally the outstanding figures in different countries, came up with the idea of we people have a brain, and this brain is not made to follow the feudal societies, the kings, and serve them, but actually we have a brain to make our own economy. This was about it. It was, we can be much more wealthy than we are if we are depending on the royal house. That was simply this idea, we are independent individuals, and we should be free. Free from the king. Because the feudal societies was basically a society where people had not been directly owned, but they had been completely dependent from the feudal class. And this was the decisive point where this bourgeoisie said, actually, we have rights that cannot be taken from us by the king. And in this way there was a discussion, early discussion, claiming something that would later become human rights, the right to live, the right to life. The right for property, that was John Locke. The king has no right to take property from us. But we have the right to own something. Now, these had been very complex and very, very difficult discussions then, what property meant. And then you come actually with this point, property meant I have property, I have the right to own something, but I do not have the right to use this property against somebody else. And I have the right to own something as long as the others can own something as well. So these had been then discussions about, basically early discussions about human rights. Before it was not necessary because it was clear the king owned, or in ancient societies actually, everybody was kind of the same, which was actually pretty brutal, because slaves had not been human beings, so they didn't have rights. So if you have people who look like human beings but are not human beings because they are slaves, you don't have to worry about them. As simple as that. Women had not been full human beings, so they didn't have rights. And the men, the male ruling class, they had been really, as citizens, human beings, and everybody had the same rights. So you didn't have to discuss them. There was not the state as we later then have had it. So that was just a reminder that we come to the end now. I propose we didn't make a second break, and it is definitely cold, that we end a little bit earlier than I think I can justify this. But let's go a little bit further there. This was the situation where the idea of human rights came into being. It was not a discussion then later coming up as an organized form of human rights, as a written down book. But you have had actually early attempts of the right of man, the right of man. And then you have had actually against this claim, and there was a document by, I forgot her name, forget all these names, Wollenscroft or something, the right of women. This was an early discussion of human rights. And then you have had discussions related to this, citizens' rights. So the men, the human beings of this society, which you still have to some extent today, as you see in Europe now with the immigration. So there had been a long history from the early bourgeois society, from the early Enlightenment years, of humans are independent, are born free, and as such they have a right. And they don't. This is enough to be born free. This is enough to claim these rights. And if you want, you can say you have two different human rights discourses. The one is with a small letter, the general human rights, and then you would have the capital letter, human rights discussion. This is when it comes to a set of laws, a set of rules written down, a set of institutions looking after them. And both together are linked in one way or another. On the one hand, the law, the legal discussion, and then the philosophy and sociology. To look at what kind of rules do we need and what kind of rules can we establish in terms of or independence of history, of the concrete society, the experience people have, and moving on then from there to an ever-growing number and differentiation. This is one problem we will come across again and again. On the one hand, you have these general human rights, and then you have the differentiation of cultural rights, economic rights, social rights, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then I'll leave it there. We'll meet on Thursday again. Try to think about a little bit as well in terms of the struggle for law. Where does it come from and where is it? I think you have this book, read it a little bit, and to look really that these huge questions are sometimes not in a cocktail, but at least in many different things we come across in everyday life.